Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil rock.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riffs? Discussing our favorite albums containing riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me, as always, are my best friends, my friends in music, Justin Swindle, Dylan Adams. They're people. They're here. How are you?
Doing great. We should change the name of the show to Thou Worship at this point.
Yeah, right. This is a Thou specific program. We'll have to go back and do all the EPs and the splits now. It'll probably take
absolutely not
take us 20 years to do it.
It's like, what is it? Last Pod does like the side stories where it's like completely out of the, the normal kind of queue. And it's like, oh, here's an episode about a murderer that only targeted Frosty Freezes in like the southern US or something. Yeah, I would have to put my foot down on all those EPs because this has been enjoyable, but my God, that is like, we found another one.
Yeah. My God. Did you hear? There's another Thou EP there. Yeah.
There's only 10 copies buried in the desert somewhere.
God.
It's next to all those copies of ET buried in the
right.
Yes. God, glad we're on the same page with that one. Out in that fucking landfill.
Oh my God.
This is the most excited I've been about a third sequel since Lethal Weapon 3.
Yeah, we're back again for Thou Part 3. All your wildest hopes and dreams have been answered. We're going to be talking about Heathen today from 2014. This album was released. Heathen. Yeah, Heathen. It's funny. I graduated recently and I spent years of my life studying journalism and how to research, only to mispronounce band members' names, albums' names, song titles. Fuck. Like, Magus. It's Magus, apparently. And I would only have to imagine that any band member in Thou listening on the other end of this was probably just putting their head through a wall, trying to, listening to three morons mispronounce an album name. I'll get to the band member in a little while, and Grissicon is how that song title is. One of my favorite songs ever.
Arkansas education at its finest.
I think maybe the problem too is that we're just in a bubble, and if we're just so confidently oh, that's how it's pronounced, and never check each other on it, we're just that's it. That's how it is.
The band Torch.
Torch.
Okay, the first time I met Swindle, I pronounced it Torche. And I think and years later, researching all of this stuff we're doing now, that Revolver interview they did, I think they were going back and forth with how to pronounce the band's name.
Right. Torque.
It's like Torque. No, it's Torque. Oh, God, just stop.
Torchy.
Just call it the Beach Boys. Call them what they are.
So,
damn.
I'll just say now, we're not perfect. We're not geniuses.
Y'all can kiss my ass.
But I do apologize for anybody listening, and maybe it ruined their experience. Maybe one person in particular who reached out to us, but we'll try to get it right. We're going to continue our series on Thou, Part 3. Like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Heathen today from 2014. This is an album that was released on my birthday. So that was pretty cool. It was released through Gilead Media. I think this was probably the record that really solidified me getting into Thou. And we touched on this in previous episodes where I remember sitting on someone's couch or floor, hearing those first couple tracks that Swindle played for us. I remember vividly sitting on my living room floor, listening to the NPR stream of this album, that kind of early stream. And I feel like that's maybe some of our experience with that. Do you remember when you first heard Heathen? Do you remember anything about it? Like those first couple listens?
I think I was with you, Austin. I think we like, I don't remember if you were working or just at Western at the time, but when I got out of work, we're like, we gotta fucking listen to this album. So we got on to sat on NPR's website for 75 minutes listening to the first stream of this.
Yeah. You know what I am kind of remembering now too is that this was before I think the days of like Roku's and like all of that shit. So I think I kind of remember putting a computer on the floor like a laptop with an HDMI cable going into the TV and listening to through that, which is how it should be listened to. If you listen to this on any other format, you're doing it wrong.
TV speakers are the best way to listen.
Dylan, how about yourself, man? What was do you remember hearing this record for the first time?
Swindle. Swindle sent it to me in a legal form somehow. It was free. It was on the internet.
They have it on their website to this day.
It's like, it's 2024. But I heard it from Swindle. And as I said in the very first episode of our Thou series, the title, Ode to Physical Pain, was just like, okay, all right, where are we going? What are we doing with this? That and hearing Into the Marshlands, which I think there's one song you could give to anybody that's never heard Thou, you could give them that one, and it at least sets them in the right direction of where to go. This is the album that kind of is the most attractive to me, just because it's kind of the first thing of them I really heard and really like digested. And this cover in particular is the one that really sticks out to me. I like that kind of metal etching wood cutting one that they use for a lot of their artwork now. But that artwork always sticks out to me a lot. And again, it's just the album that really sticks with me the most, albeit after going through essentially this band's whole catalog in the last many weeks. I would say Summit is right up there with Heathen for me. Like but Heathen is kind of what I measure this band around.
Yeah, I mean, listening to this album, we obviously touched on it with Summit. I feel like it definitely elevated, how this band approached recording and like how they constructed songs. I think it really culminates here very well. I think it's like, yes, it's like a 75-minute record, but I have never turned this on and felt bored or like, fuck, when is this going to be over? I genuinely like putting on this 75-minute record and just kind of getting lost in it. There are definitely moments on this album where, as we've mentioned in previous episodes, that it's like that repetition, that kind of like meditative type of experience that I find myself having on a lot of these albums. Is this might be and I could be wrong, but at the time, this was probably the longest gap that the band's experienced with like a full-length record, right? You have, Tyrant and Peasant were like about a year, and then it was like a couple years before Summit, and so now you have like a 4-year gap from Summit to Heathen, but they're still releasing stuff in between that, as they often do. I mean, they released like a ton of EPs. They had splits with Moloch, Cower, Hell, Kalwoon, Walled City. There's a lot of things going on in the background too before the recording of this record. And I will say that this album has been, at least in some iterations, like some idea of this record, whether it just be the title or, maybe the themes of the record had been like considered for a long time. I think I read where the name Heathen was like agreed upon. It was going to be the title of the LP, like before they even kind of knew what it was going to be about. But if I have done my research correctly, Matthew Thudium, the band's guitarist, brought the first song for the record in Free Will around September 2011, let's say. This is kind of the thesis for the record. It is the first song for the album, and I think it kind of sets everything up very nicely. All the lyrical concepts, all of the sounds that you hear on the record, I think are very easily presented in this album, or in this song rather. And then I think they kind of built from here.
I think in one interview, maybe I read it wrong. In one interview, it seemed like they said Heathen was going to be the A side of the record and Magus was going to be what the B side of the record was called.
Wow.
And then they decided to go with two completely different albums. But it's cool that like from Summit or even before Summit, they were like, we're going to write 3 whole fucking records like in a trilogy, essentially, with all like thematically the same idea across all 3 records.
That's a interesting thought too, and I didn't know that with the kind of like one side of the album, the other side, because they are very connected. I think I've also read in interviews where like, here's the concepts for this record, here is like the opposite kind of, right, on the other side of the spectrum. So that's interesting. I didn't know that they would have been like kind of smashed together like that. It would have been, I wonder how that would have came out in that way. But 2-hour record, right? Or 3-hour record.
Oh my God. That's,
I don't think it was supposed to be. I think I assume when they were thinking that, it wasn't going to be 2 75-minute records put together.
I don't know. I mean, could you imagine it? Just picture this. 10 years ago, you guys are waiting for this record to come out. And it's like, all right, it's going to be A side is Heathen. B side is Magus. It's like you're waiting for it and you don't know the track listing, nothing. You get it and it's lit. It's 3 hours of fucking music. Just whop.
I would have been
the pressings of the record. Could you imagine all 180 gram? Like it would be a brick. Just like picking my God, it's a marketing nightmare, but I would be so excited.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about like all of this music, being written for this album, because there's a quote from Brian that I saw where it was, "We were definitely hoping to cultivate more material for this one than we had for other releases. We've always had it in our heads to overwrite for the full lengths so we could distill it to songs that just fit right together. We've never been able to do that in the past because we've always seemed to rush to record as soon as we had just enough material to fit on an LP, usually so we would be able to get it out for a big tour, or we've had a number of other commitments we were trying to fill at the same time, splits, EPs, or whatever, so songs would get split up and parceled out a bit. We had a clean slate for this, and Andy having moved, we didn't really have any looming tour plans on the horizon, so the writing process was a lot more focused, and our schedule was pretty flexible. I think all of those things really helped us." So kind of the classic thing, right? The Bruce Springsteen thing, right, Dylan? Just to bring in Bruce again. Just make a bunch of...
Every fucking episode.
Bring in all of the...
reference.
Any prolific band owes credit to that man for just writing incessantly.
To that same breath, though, I did find another maybe kind of contradicting thought that Brian had. This is another quote from a different article. Funnily enough, it didn't have enough time to breathe or percolate as maybe it could have, but it probably affected me more than the other guys. In terms of the songs, I'm personally really happy with how all the songs on that record sound, except for a few vocal flubs I probably would have changed. So maybe, I don't know, take it how you will. Those are the quotes that I found.
To what Brian had to say about his kind of some of his vocal flubs, and there's a couple things he would change. That kind of goes hand in hand with when something actually done. You just kind of have to go, okay, I'm through with it when you're creative, because nothing could, truthfully, if we had our hands on anything, nothing's ever really done.
Yeah.
It's because you're going to think of it differently. And by the end of it, if you actually had the amount of time you wanted to, it's probably going to sound completely different than what it started out as. So like, that's just kind of the curse of being an artist or a musician, a performer, whatever it may be. When's it ever truly done? Because if you did change those vocal flubs that he hears, maybe it sounds completely different. Maybe a melody's different. Maybe, a stanza, whatever, something is different. But that's the curse.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same interview, but in a different interview, possibly a different interview. In one interview talking about that, he specifically says Into the Marshland was one of the things he like the opening to Into the Marshland was one of the things. And I was like, what do you, what could you possibly be fucking talking about?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Precisely. It's, we're our own worst critics. So we're going to hear every little crack, every little tuning issue, every little glob of spit, whatever it may be. We're going to hear every bit of it. So I just recently watched the Exhumed documentary, and one of their later albums, I believe it's kind of their return album, All Guts, No Glory, or All Guts, No, yeah, it's All Guts, No Glory.
No, it's got to be your bowl.
It's your bowl. You get a good look at a steak by sticking your head up a butcher's ass. But one of the guys, Leon Del Muerte, was talking about how they did the album so quickly. He's like, I could just hear my voice blown out by the end of it. He's like, some of that stuff was just coming out by the end of it. He's and I didn't fucking hear it. I think it's a great record. It's one of my favorite Exhumed records. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. We're all our own worst critics.
So I mentioned Andy in that quote. Andy moved to Oakland, California, around like September 2012. They did like a ton of touring around this time too. I think they mentioned a few months of touring 10 days or more out of each month. And then they kind of start to focus more on Heathen. So, touching back on Matthew, he brings Free Will into the mix. That's like the first song of the album. It took a while for them to have a second song. I think they sent like a scratch recording of Immorality Dictates. I think Andy sent a scratch track to everyone before he moved. And so then the band fleshed it out. They kind of did some writing before he moved, and then they like fleshed it all out when he came back to New Orleans, basically to like before they went to record the record. There's a quote here that says, "We record basic tracks live on all our records, so emailing wasn't much of an option." So,
wow. Okay. That's something, especially you got one of your guys living out like 2 days away in fucking Oakland. Yeah. That's also dedication too, to go like, nope, we don't do anything till we're all in the room together recording live. Which adds to the vibe of the records too. But that's pretty stiff. I mean, especially when you live that far apart, like that's a scheduling nightmare for sure.
Going back to, I guess, the last episode when we talked about Peasant and Summit, about how they recorded Tyrant basically at the same time as Peasant. I guess like when the band started, they used to practice like 5 days a week.
That makes sense.
For like hours.
Yeah.
And they talked about in maybe an interview for like the new record, they talked about how around this time they would practice less, but when they did practice, it would be like a marathon. They would practice for like 5 hours or 8 hours or something. So I guess to make up for the like small amount of time that they were able to get together, they were like, we're gonna practice for like a work day's worth of practice. You're putting your hours in.
Listen, that's something that I've always liked, is when bands would do something like that. They're like, this is a job. They're like, we may work, but this is a job in this sense. I know the band I was in before I moved from Arkansas, we, myself and the guitar player, one of my best friends, lived less than a mile away from each other. So it was, all right, we're out. He's out of work. I'm done working. Like, let's just go. We would play music 4 to 6 hours a day for at least 4 days a week. So the music just like would start one way, and then it just got more and more technically proficient and more challenging. And by the end of it, I mean, you could play it upside down, backwards, eyes closed, whatever way. And it was like, oh, it's nothing. Like you could think about, well, I'm going to order the hot dog after the set. I'm going to, do this, and by the end of the set's done, it's like, yeah, that's dedication. That's a lot of fucking work. And that's a lot of button heads too in a small room.
I can't even stand an hour looking at y'all right now. We're not even in the same room.
Oh, it's mutual.
Yeah. They all seem like they're always perfectly happy with each other, those folks in now.
That fucking Revolver interview gets me every time.
They never seem like they're annoyed with each other.
Not once. Never a time. Maybe we should touch on some of the lyrical themes of this record. I guess we kind of, mentioned that Magus and Heathen are related in kind of maybe polarizing ways, but nature, maybe more rooted in the physical world that we navigate through.
I am the rock that starts the avalanche.
Hell yeah, that song kicks ass.
I'm the spark that lights the inferno. That is, woof. Okay, he sold me on that one.
Then there's like mentions of the sensual world, ideas of pleasure and pain, which definitely comes up in track.
Oh, we have such sights to show you.
I couldn't tell if that one was like more or less like a. We'll
if
get
it's
to
a
it
Clive
later.
Barker reference, I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Maybe someone can attest to that.
I definitely thought of it in the back of my head. I'm not sure if that's the angle they're going for, but it would be funny if that were the thing. But
just a pile of muscle and blood in the corner.
God, is it Frank? Right?
Yep. Frank. That's it, Frank. Uncle Frank.
Why was that woman? I still don't understand why that woman was so turned on by that pile of goo.
Hey man, maybe that is just a view of the female gender just going like, this is what we're left with. This is what we're supposed to be attracted to, huh?
Always settling down.
I can change him. But yeah, Swindle, thoughts on the lyrical themes of this record?
I love it. My pea-sized brain could really understand most of the lyrics on this record. I especially love Free Will, Feral Fawn, and Into the Marshlands. Those are probably three of my favorite. Also love In Defiance of Sages too.
With me being a knuckle dragging moron, sometimes the really like vague and storied lyrics kind of go over my head quite a distance, and having something that's a little bit more straightforward in the approach is really nice. It's kind of like, tell us how you really feel, Brian.
I was gonna say it's funny we were talking about like the I guess accessibility of this record. There's a quote that I found that I don't know if Brian was referring to the lyricism of this record, but he said, "Heathen is an interesting record for us because it felt like our most accessible record to a large degree." So I don't know, maybe he's talking about the lyrics. I don't know if he's talking about the music because it's still like fucking pummeling and challenging.
It is 100%. But I can definitely see how he could view this record as a little bit more accessible. There's definitely a different kind of vibe and tonality to all the songs, I should say. It does seem like it flows a little bit differently than maybe the prior releases. But this would be the record I'd hand to somebody and go like, start here, move forward, move backwards, start here. This is the good entry point. And that's not a slight at all. When you're in a band for so long, like these guys were, and moving as quickly as they did with however many releases and so on and so forth, you're going to progress even more. You're either going to it either goes one of two ways. You either start to get more cohesive in the way you write, or it gets more technically challenging. And this band just got more cohesive because the songs, it feels like songs, not to say that the other albums didn't have like traditional song structures, because a lot of the songs do. But this one definitely feels like, we start the record off with a 14.5-minute track, but it's a song. Yeah. It's not just like, that's a heavy track. That's a song. Like how it's structured. It's just the verses are bigger and longer. It does seem a little bit more accessible.
When I took notes on the album, I wrote that a lot of the lyrics kind of weirdly for thou and weirdly for like doom metal, they're kind of self-affirming lyrics. Like it is not like we're fucked. The planet is exploding. The sun is gonna crash. It's like
Found a new man underneath.
at the foot of Mount Driscoll is kind of like you're insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe, but otherwise it's like, live and don't take any of the shit that anyone says like too seriously. Just go out there and like live in the moment that you exist in.
It's hopeful. I mean, in that way, it's like it's hopeful and like very, it's like beautiful. Like as ugly as this music can be sometimes, it's like, wow, all right, that's pretty profound shit. Like
there's definitely something to this record too. And I was reading it as I was getting ready for the record of a kind of take your life into your own hands kind of thing. That's very thelemic. Do what thou willst. I think I got that quote right. But it's, and that's not to like dig into like, Anton LaVey or, God, why is his name? Sorry, not Anton LaVey. That's not the dig into like Aleister Crowley, which is like thelemic stuff and everything. But there's definitely a, take your own life into your own hands. Nobody's going to accomplish anything except you for you, kind of thing. And, whereas what Swindle was saying, a lot of doom metal, a lot of stoner, a lot of, death metal, it's very much like it's introspective about I'm in this much pain. How do I solve it? Or what am I going to do? Or I just want to end it. Whereas this is definitely a little bit more, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what you can do with it. Here's what you're presented with. Here's how you can sort this out because you're the only one that can change it for you.
We'll get into some of the more specific stuff as we kind of go through the tracks, but let's talk about the lineup really quick. Again, we have Mitch Wells on bass, Andy Gibbs on guitars, Matthew Thudium on guitars, Brian Funk vocals, and we, of course, have a new drummer on this record, Josh Nee on drums. He made his recording debut with Thou on the To the Chaos Wizard EP, which I mentioned in our first episode. He had previously played in a indie rock band with Mitch called Man Plus Building. I also think Josh, at some point in the band, maybe it always had, I think he like is some sort of audio engineer. There was this like live stream or maybe a pre-recorded performance that the band did at like this recording studio that I think Josh worked at. And I remember like waking up in the morning when it premiered and like making my coffee and like watching it. But so he must, maybe he has some sort of like engineering background or like audio editing sort of profession perhaps, but that's kind of what I remember of it. But yeah, Josh's presence is definitely felt on this record in that he hits the fuck out of the drums on this album. there are moments on this album where I'm like, oh my God, like he is like hitting it as hard as he can. Like it's so awesome.
There's points on here too where he is, and Swindle, you might be able to hit this more on the head than I will, but he plays at the very back of the beat. He plays almost completely behind the beat. There's certain points that I hear it, I'm like, is he off? But he's just at the tail end of it to a point that it's like he's fallen the fuck off his drum stool, like really on the like behind the beat. I was like, oh, some Jimmy Bower shit, like just on the back end of the beat. I'll dig in a little bit that in some of the tracks I heard that in, but I did notice like right out the gate, because Summit had like some of the most technical drumming this band had ever had. Whereas that was the first difference I saw on the records was the drumming on that record's a lot busier. Whereas the drumming on this record is more locked in and kind of pounding. More of like in
the pocket.
He does do a couple things on the record that do stand out, but maybe that's it. Maybe it is like, it's my first record. Let's do something a little different. Or it's my first record. How do I, what do I want these songs to sound like without stepping all over what these guys have written?
It's a Charlie Watts versus maybe a Bill Ward, I guess.
I was going to make a Bill Ward comparison to him.
Well, I mean, like, I thought like Terry is like very Bill Ward-esque because there is like a lot of these like, kind of you're all over. I don't want to say like all over the place because it makes sense for the performance. Whereas like, I would say that Josh is like more straightforward. It serves the song, and it's still made an impact on me. I'm not like saying that because it's straightforward, it's bad. It's just like, oh, okay, this is like that much more driving, maybe. Like it is like it fits with the track, I guess. We also have some guest appearances on this album as well. Emily McWilliams also making a return appearance on this record with some vocals. Of course, Emily McWilliams first made, I think, an appearance on a Thou record with the split We Passed Like Night from Land to Land in 2008, performing vocals and piano on the Defeatists' Lament. Emily is a longtime collaborator of the band, and if you haven't listened to it, Silver Godling is a really great kind of experimental piano-driven solo project that Emily does. We also have Derek Zimmer on additional vocals, who provides some vocal performances on Summit and the Sacrifice EP from 2014. Now, this record was recorded in January of 2013 in Algiers, Louisiana.
Like the compilation.
That's right. You did it.
I did that on the last episode.
You're gonna blow this case wide open. I don't know what it means, but it's all connected. It's all.
He's got the yarn.
Yeah,
right behind him.
Hey man, I'm just knock my eye sideways and I'm right there.
I'm glad we got this guy on the podcast. He's getting it. This album was mixed and recorded by James Whitten, who of course worked on Summit. He also would later work on The Helm of Sorrow, the collaboration with Emma Ruth Rundle, recorded Magus, and also worked with Bargast and I Hate God. Yes, Dylan.
He just did the most recent Brat record.
Did he really?
He fucking did. Like I saw it in his notes and I went, there's no fucking way it's the same band. I was like, oh shit, this is cool.
That's awesome. I didn't know that.
Dude, that is, and that's wildly different from this for sure.
We also have Adam Tucker, who mastered the album, also worked with Bargast, Bastard Sapling, Majesties, MSW, who I think is also Hell. Mutilation Rights, Phobophilic, Ulthar, Vile Creature, Yautja. Swindle, you provided a quote for the recording that I thought was kind of interesting too.
Like you were saying in the last episode, maybe, pretty much after their second album, anytime they went to record, they would record like they would have all the songs that they had prepared for the full length, but then also record all their like splits and EPs and stuff. And I think at the same time that they recorded Heathen, they recorded The Sacrifice and Release from Love, which are both their collabs, right? With
Release from Love is, I think The Sacrifice is like an EP, but I think I have Release from Love on vinyl somewhere, but they're all like, it's kind of crazy, right? Because at least the Release from Love is like, that's in a completely different mindset than this fucking record or the EP. So it's pretty like crazy to me that within such a short amount of time, you're able to kind of like change your headspace or like change like your approach to what you're doing. And I know a lot of like the body stuff is probably, a lot of improv, like just kind of from the gut kind of thing. They're just in a room together and that's how they write, or at least that's how I've like heard how they write with other bands, with like their collabs with like Full Hell and stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty bonkers that you're recording all of that material in like less than a week.
5 days. Yeah.
It's like people reading like multiple books at once. I don't know how people do that. I never understood that. I'm reading this history book. I'm reading a graphic novel. I'm reading this like, how in the fuck are you doing that? You're sick. That's the only way it can be described. I don't get it. I'm sure it has a lot to do with being able to multitask and like put certain things in certain, tier list or anything like that. I can't do that because I'm a fucking simpleton. But hey, more power to people that can.
If you have all the shit ready, why not? When you're already like in the headspace of recording music and you're like,
absolutely.
Like getting looser every time you play. And like, if you're in the zone, feeling creative, why not just do it while you're fucking doing it?
Right. And it seems like more imperative than ever, especially with Andy living like in a different state
Across the
Time is
country,
money.
right?
you almost kind of have to.
Yep.
But maybe we should, shall we get into the record? Should we discuss some of these songs?
I have a quote to really put into perspective what we were talking about with like, you have the time, do it. The immortal Frank Reynolds mentioned that he doesn't have much time left in this world, but he's going to get really weird with it.
I guess that also kind of translates to the lyrical themes of the record. live in the moment. But yeah, I mean, there's like literally a song on here where it's like basically like time's made up. Oh, there's only the present, so you might as well just live in the moment. And I guess that also includes getting weird with it. So
thanks, Danny.
Let's start with the first track of the album, the first song written for the album, the fucking almost 15-minute song, Free Will.
It's the weirdest Rush cover I've ever fucking heard. It's the weirdest fucking Rush cover.
This album starts off completely different than every Thou record. Pretty much like Summit starts a little similar. It's just like guitar arpeggiated picking, but it's for like 30 seconds and then there's blast beats or whatever.
Yeah.
And the first two records just like immediately blast you in the fucking face. This album starts off very slow and it also actually starts off quiet. Like the guitar starts off by itself and it builds and people join the guitar, but they also, in addition to building the instruments, they make it louder. Like the riff starts off very quiet and then it's like every time it goes through a little bit louder, a little bit louder.
Yeah, I think they really do. I think they really make an intention to like do the slow build, whereas like maybe on previous records, when you get to the loud part, I guess it's just like fully in it, whereas this is like much more of like a slow burn and build, like you're saying.
A dramatic build up for sure.
100%. I do like the kind of like feedback kind of like intro to it a little bit. And it would probably be very easy for me to say, I hate God, but I think this is like, oh, okay, this is a thou feedback, like for sure.
You read the liner notes and you obviously see that there's a different drummer, but this is what I mentioned earlier. He's almost so behind the beat, it feels like he's off, but he's clearly not.
Yeah.
But it adds to that intensity building up and the volume is building up. It's very anthemic, like the starting of the song. And then it just like, you get walloped with that just bag of rice right in the fucking head. Like it's just right there. It's like the 20-pound bag of jasmine rice, just bap right in the head, just kicks right in.
That is what I always think of when I listen to Thou, is getting smacked in the face with a bag of rice.
It's Jackass 3. It's, it's Aaron McGeehee walking in with the tray of food and just the hand, just bap.
He fell for the soup.
He fell for the soup.
Everybody who listened to this song fell for the soup. Production noticeably improved upon, I think, or at least like, because you essentially have the same core group of people that worked on the last record, even the producer or the engineer. So again, just kind of getting better and like finding new ways to make Thou records, I guess.
I think they used like, not only is the production better, but they use less distortion. Like everything
that makes sense.
Like there are definitely parts where they're like, palm muting, being really heavy, being really like shit. Why can't I think of the word? I can never think of the word. Dissonant.
Mm-hmm.
And they use like heavy distortion in those parts, but
Yep.
I think a lot of the time they are still using distortion or overdrive, but it's a lot less.
It's remarkable to know that if you dial the gain back on your amps, kids, that you can probably sound just a little bit better. you don't need near as much. If you're using a fucking 5150 that's got stupid amounts of gain, you could probably just turn it to 4. It'll be just fine. Just plenty of it. And plus, if you've got a fuzz pedal in front of it like these guys do, just roll the volume off just a hair. It's all right.
I'm still trying to figure out my PV now.
It's just like the Walk This Way video. Just everything's cranked.
Gross. I hate Aerosmith.
Damn.
Run DMC's there. It's fine.
Another great part about this, of course, is the theme with many of our record, repetition. Our good friend Repetition's back for a lot of these records.
Repetition.
For a 14 and a half minute long song, or however long it is, again, you can just get kind of lost listening to it, and you're just kind of vibing with the record. I love the vocals on this. There's some like layered vocals, which I had never really caught before, I will say. I don't know if I want to necessarily call it like Bear and Snake, like we mentioned in our cattle decapitation series, but you do kind of have more of like Brian's screaming kind of vocals and more of like a kind of lower register guttural kind of vocal approach in the like just underneath
The very beginning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By the way, the opening of this album is such a fucking great like bit of lines. Open your eyes and exalt in this fragile world, in this knowing flesh, in this very moment. Woo.
It's lyrically, this song is so great.
Brian is very much on par with like a Robert Frost.
I mean, we are the stone that starts the avalanche. What is it like? We are the cough that spreads disease.
Sparks the plague.
Sparks the plague. We're the we're the spark that
lights the inferno.
Lights the inferno.
Yeah. Ugh.
That is that's almost it's almost chant-like, right?
Yeah.
Because it keeps repeating that same cycle all the way through. It's very much a great way to end that track. Like just those lyrical placements and everything.
But it's not, that's only halfway through the song.
No, it's the end. It's not a 14-minute song at all.
Also, the riff during that part is crazy. What a riff.
Yeah,
very driving riff to go with those like chant-like lyrics.
I got chills, man. I get chills listening to the song, especially like reading along with the like lyric sheet. And again, I think it, the way I interpreted it is like, it's like fuck philosophy, fuck like poetry, just like live in the moment. Like there's a line that says, there is no such thing as time. There is no such thing as negation. There is only this tangible, perceptible world. There is only this moment, this very moment. Like, wow, that is like, yeah. Sometimes like, well, as a host of a podcast that like truly overanalyzes every little bit of a thing, sometimes just like, maybe the Thou fans in that comment will appreciate it. It's like, yeah, sometimes just living in the moment is pretty enjoyable.
As they pull their heads out of the eternal trough and look up with viscera sliding down from their fucking chins, going with a loud, just unintelligible grunt in appreciation. That's how I feel like that conversation probably went.
That was a very funny interaction, but talking about this song, it reminds me of the Death song, The Philosopher, which is kind of also a jab at like, people who make up all of these terms and try to like conceptualize and act very intelligent when it's like, come on, man, like it's at the end of the day, we're like only here for a very short amount of time. Does this really fucking matter at this point?
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. I'm not well versed in philosophy. I've only tried to read 2 philosophy books, and I fucking hated both of them. One of them, to be fair, one of them was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which is just pretentious and douchebaggery at its finest. But I fucking just was mad the whole time.
my dad, when I was 14 years old, got me like the most last minute fucking gift I've probably ever seen. He's like, my son likes Metallica, so I can get him anything with Metallica. And it was Philosophy and Metallica.
Oh boy.
And it was like, I don't even remember a thing from it. I had it, was like, I started reading. I went, nope. At 14 years old, even then, I was like, yeah, this is sniffing your own farts and the art of it.
How would that work? Like, how does that connect? I'm very curious. Like,
You see, everybody's life is like the lyrics to Wherever My Ray Roam. And wherever you lay your head, it's home. But sometimes it can be sad but true that nothing else really matters.
this is just
And
like
that
Bill
no
and
one
Ted
will
2.
be unforgiven.
We're all just dust in the wind. Every rose has its thorn. Every dust has its down. Sorry. Anyway, any final thoughts on the song in particular?
Neil Peart needs writing credits.
All right, on to the next song. The instrumental, Dawn. Love this. Definitely a precursor to the EP, Inconsolable, I think, with some of that kind of like acoustic, very atmospheric. For it being like, an acoustic like arrangement, it sounds so big with all this like atmosphere and reverb. I think I read in the notes where this was obviously a kind of purposeful addition to the record. I think Brian said early on when we started writing for Heathen, we talked about having interludes that could be songs unto themselves, but also serve to bridge all the other songs together, so the record would seem like one big piece.
It's
Stuff
a breath.
we came with. The stuff we came up with ended up being a little shorter than we had originally envisioned and acted more like stopgaps between songs, but it worked out pretty well, I think, because all of the songs on Heathen are fairly long and dense, so it definitely serves to break up the hour or so of doom and gloom.
So they were going to make the record longer.
They were going for the 90 mark.
I think he's saying that these interludes were going to be full songs also, but they just ended up being like a minute or.
Christ. It breaks the album up a lot. I like these kind of segue tracks far more on this record than I think some of the other. I think calling them segue tracks is discrediting them, and I'm not intending to do that. But it does feel like you're pulling your head up above water a little bit to like go, okay, I got a moment, and back to hell.
Yeah, the sequencing on this album is good because especially after that 15-minute song and the end of Into the Marshland, you're like, can I take a second? Like,
yeah.
Can we?
Feral Fawn, which I guess Fawn is it's the goat man.
Mr. Tumnus.
I didn't know this at all, and I know very little about it, but on Bandcamp, the song In Defiance of the Sages also has a person's name, and it's in the title. It's Wolfie Landstreicher, I think. Maybe that's how it's pronounced. So I was looking up this person. This person is like an anarchist philosopher, maybe. But they also wrote some stuff under a different name, and that name is Feral Fawn.
Ah, what the
There we
fuck?
go.
So I don't know if it's a reference to that same person. And I mean, judging by the lyrics of In Defiance of the Sages, it seems like Brian may or may not even like that person or the shit that they wrote. So
Right. That's wild.
Who knows?
I did forget to mention, I think In Defiance of the Sages is also mentioned in the first song too, like in the lyric.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
the lyric of that song. Yeah.
But that's wild. I didn't make that connection. That's pretty cool. And also apparently is half goat, half man. So there's that.
Actually,
I don't know
I actually think that's a satyr. I think I'm wrong with that. Again, thanks Philatides from Hercules.
Another Danny DeVito reference.
Another Danny DeVito reference.
This one also has a slow build. I felt like I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, like getting wider and wider because it's like getting louder and building. And I'm like, when's it coming? When's the fucking thing happening? And it's like got this very primitive kind of rhythm, driving rhythm with it as well.
It feels like an Explosions in the Sky song. And I don't mean that in any sort of strange connotation.
What do you mean by that?
What do I mean by that?
Excuse me?
God damn it, we're gonna get shit for this one too. It definitely, this is the album, and this song in particular kind of sparked the idea that I had. This is the album where I think everybody in the band kind of came from different areas and different musical backgrounds, but there's always been that kind of like post rock kind of feel to this band and all those parts. This feels like the album that they went, let's just kind of embrace that a little bit more. And they kind of figured out how to incorporate it without making it sound forced, of like, oh, we don't want to bring this in, but let's kind of bring it in. And they just went, okay, this is where we came from. This is what it's going to sound like. And it definitely seems like it's more solidified on this album.
It is dirty though too. There's like literally a part where you could almost hear the point where they just click on the fucking like rat distortion pedal, and it's just like, boof.
Basically, the first half of this song is like, I think it's all the same chord progressions, and the rhythm is like basically exactly the same for like the first half of the song, and then they just do the small, like there's a part like 4 minutes and 15 seconds in where they just do like a couple of like syncopated hits in the riff, and I was like, that's such a small thing to change after doing the same riff for like 4 minutes, and it's so fucking effective after droning kind of for a while. And then immediately after that, that's when they do like the fucking slow, the like crawling sludge pace.
I was like, please thou, I'm just a boy, no more. Like, I mean, I love it, but I was like, oh my God. There is a lot to dig in here musically as well. Like, yeah, you have like, there are like parts where kind of like we touched on the last record, where it feels like it's in unison, but they're really like playing kind of different parts. Like, it's so cool. There's like even I really love the like kind of higher, like sharper kind of notes on this track as well. That, again, probably those dynamics, I love them. And then, so yeah, you get to the outro part, which is just so slow and unravels into that feedback, where it kind of, I don't know how to explain it, where it really just kind of goes right into the next song.
Oh, you mean the hit?
That like real like singular piece of feedback that like just feeds in the next thing. So fucking cool. Lyrically, I thought this was cool when I was reading through it. I'm like, the way I envisioned the song was like almost about nature just kind of reclaiming the earth, and like all this like overgrown, trees and plants all over like a city landscape basically. And I'm like, all right, that's it. We're done. Like, it's over. Society's done now. We can live in trees and, wear loincloths or something.
We ain't going to be there when that happens.
That's true.
Hopefully we will.
Yeah.
This species will be gone.
If we could just collapse capitalism, then we got it made, We'll just live amongst the ivy.
I need McRib to come back, and I need the mass marketing of the McRib. Guys, I don't think you guys understand. That has to happen. I need everybody to be paid slightly below minimum wage just to keep them fucking hungry, to make more of those McRibs. So the people driving through the line can spend even more while they're being underpaid to get more fucking McRibs. Just so some douche nozzle that lives in a fucking multi-billion-dollar house that like wants to just suppress every fucking human being can make that much more money. We need it. We don't need this, like, we don't need everybody to be happy. We don't need everybody to, be comfortable in their lives and, and not have to worry about health care. And, God forbid you get a sniffle and you have to go to the doctor and they're like, hey, that's $638 just for us to tell you need to go get some more rest. We don't need that.
That's right.
I feel like I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
This is the network moment.
Yeah.
I do really like the lyric of the song. Basically, backspent no more in the mad race of resource production and consumption. Just imagining that new world.
Beautiful.
God, that's a cattle decapitation album title. Jesus.
I thought the McRib was.
Lips and assholes, man. And then it kicks into the fucking hit. Those huge harmonized guitars that make me think of Paul Bearer immediately. Like Foundation of Burden. I hear that and it's like, this is the song. This is the song you give to any fan of this band or someone that's into like this genre, and you're just like, hey, here's an easy segue. You want to listen to something heavier? Bam. Now go digging, bud.
Into the Marshlands. I agree. This is an all-time track. I think when I look back at this record, there are many things that I love about it, but this is like definitely a standout.
Mm-hmm.
The fucking riffs. Yeah, you say Paul Bearer. I mean, obviously Crowbar too. I think you could make the comparisons there. Kind of like oddly uplifting chord progressions as well to me. Fucking great. But also feels like you're kind of wading through a marsh as well. So,
I mean, it's you mentioned Crowbar. It kind of feels like is it To Build a Mountain that starts out with those great fucking harmonies. Like, yeah, absolutely. Classic rock shit. It's what it is for sure.
So much of the song is variations of the same riff too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think that's genius.
I read some notes that and that's this album in comparison to maybe the three before it has less riffs on it than maybe the three before it. That's not a negative, but it also gets down to you learn more about songwriting, right? You go, oh, I only need like 2 and I can just, move it around. And one of the I read a review on the album and I can't remember the source of it. But they're like, oh yeah, Into the Marshland has like tons of riffs. And when I heard it, I came to the same point that you did. Oh, it's just a variation of the first riff.
The same riff.
Yeah, over and over. But again, it can sound different. But it's also the point of you got a good fucking riff, just beat it into the ground.
Yep.
Submerge it.
Yeah, it stuck in my head like all the time. And then also the outro riff, 100%. I just like all that's. There's not much going up here except those, really, honestly.
What's he building in there? What's he building? Can we all just mutually agree that like Tom Waits would fit more in the sludge realm than anything just because it's so fucking weird?
Yeah, probably. And that voice would fit pretty well as, that gravel.
Gonna slap that hog.
Lyrics again. Abandon the city. Go out into the woods. Get naked. Live out there. It'll be much more fun than what we're doing right now. That's how I view it. I just want to get naked.
Flee the dying fortress of civilization.
I'm going back to West Virginia, by God. Dixie Dave.
We have another interlude, Clarity. This time kind of a single, like clean kind of guitar with like a lot of delay, maybe even like something that kind of reverses I don't know. It's lush with like effects on it.
Yeah. Is it Sabbath Volume 4 that has all the segue tracks? Like,
I don't remember.
Has like Laguna Sunrise.
Oh, yeah, that's on that record.
Like, isn't it Sabbath Volume 4? It's either Master of Reality or Sabbath Volume 4. It's kind of got the segue tracks to it. And hearing how the sequencing of this record is really made me think of that era of Black Sabbath as well. And it's just like, okay, this fits really well. Like they're splitting all of these giant songs with these kind of moments of like relaxation almost of like, all right, I mentioned it in when we were discussing Dawn that it's just like, okay, come up for air, back down you go.
Somebody asked in an interview I read in an article where it was like, what do you think this band is? Like, how would you describe its sound? It's like Black Sabbath filtered through Bleach Air and Nirvana or something like that. And I'm like, hell yeah. Fuck yeah, dude.
I think we're going to hear a lot of that on the new record.
Think so.
I think
we'll never get to it.
Wouldn't know anything about that.
don't. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
anyway. At the foot of Mount Driscoll. This is where I noted that Josh was hitting the fuck out of those drums, like just punching a hole in them. This the slowest song on the record, perhaps? This felt like the doomiest track for me on the album. It's so driving and slow.
Yeah. My notes reflected that as well. Like, this has to be the doomiest track. I think I actually have it as like a lumbering monolith.
Damn, big word. See, I mean, we might fuck something up sometimes, but we know words on this show. This is a word show now.
If we don't, we just edit it out.
Yeah, fuck them.
See, I think it's pronounced monolith.
God.
I love that everyone, like, the song starts off with acoustic, or not acoustic, with guitar for like a second, and then everyone comes in the middle of the riff just to fuck up your brain. Sorry.
While it is like very heavy, I mean, the dynamics on this, there are like cleaner guitars, and you know, there's a part on here that I felt like almost sounded like it was on a loop. Like they just had the cleaner pick like guitar parts with the delay. I just was like, it's like almost like circulating again, that repetition thing here. But then it goes right back into the bullshit again, like right back into the pit,
right into the bullshit.
Well, you know what I mean.
It's
please don't hurt me though.
It sounds like this track sounds like the Deftones to me.
Okay, interesting.
Kind of that. Again, post rock, post influences, that kind of stuff. Shoegaze. It's in there, but it's a lot of the guitar structure with these lush layered kind of guitar parts that are in there, in those kind of like not necessarily the knuckle dragging parts, but like it's there. And Stephen Carpenter may be a flat earther, but he did something with the guitar that was at least interesting. And it's very evident with like a lot of these really heavy bands that are using, you know, crazy tunings and tuning down low and layering these big guitar sounds out there, because he had a big part of that. But it definitely sounds like, you know, I'm a big fan of the self-titled Deftones record from like 2003, and it sounds sounds like a lot of stuff on there, like Minerva and Hexagram. Definitely has this weird lush kind of vibe to it that I liked a lot.
I feel like, I don't know for a fact, but it feels like in the middle of the, like, I don't know, it seems like the first riff or series of riffs goes for a while, but like in the middle of it, there's just a weird kind of major key change, and then they go right back into like just pure sadness. And then like the major key change comes back I don't know, a minute later or something, and they play it once, and then it goes right back again.
Can't get too happy, Swindle. You can't let that shit last too long. I like being here. It's cold. It feels good.
I fucking love the lyrics in this song are so good. We are nothing. Yeah. We are nothing. Insignificant dust motes.
I am a living, breathing piece of defecating. Yeah, it's all right there. I get it.
It's the other line too. Except our frail short lives. I love it because it's like, yeah, we're really all knowing. We're just like doing all this shit, and it's like we don't know anything. Like just fucking, you know, life's a garden. Dig it, man.
We're all,
you know.
Thank you. We're all making this shit up as we go anyway.
Right.
Nobody knows a damn thing. It's kind of like when you hit the certain age where you're like, my parents didn't know a fucking thing. They were just flying by the seat, and somehow I'm still alive.
It just makes me think like, okay, yeah, like, and they kind of mentioned the song where it's like, all right, I think we're just these creatures that are really afraid to die, so we are like trying to figure it out through science, you know, literature or religion, and it's just like, what? Shut up. Just fucking live. It's fine.
It's like I wrote that it's like the Sagan thing where it's like from the show, Carl Sagan show, where it like shows Earth, and then it like has Saturn, and then Jupiter, and then like the sun, and then other stars, and then like galaxies and shit, just to show you like how insignificant you are within like literally space.
Yeah. Thanks, Carl. Yeah. In Defiance of the Sages. Huge as shit. Sounds big, Very big song.
That bend that they do, that is the fucking melody. It starts like it's at the beginning of the song. Like it starts right in. It's the motif throughout the song. It changes slightly here and there, but that motif keeps coming back. That's the fucking hook of the song.
I love when play the riff back, but even slower. Like,
I mean, it's
holy shit. Yeah, that's rad as hell.
And it's thick. It's dense. One guitar seems like it might be slightly out of tune, and I like it because it adds these weird disjointed kind of semitones in the midst of all of it.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's a great track. This is kind of the track setting up the end of the record for me. Again, a heavy track followed by another really heavy track. My notes are pretty straightforward on this one. It's just a heavy, hooky fucking track.
Yeah, I also wrote that, like, that opening especially is dissonant, but it's not like, it's only mildly dissonant. It's like one of the two guitars or like the bass could be playing a tritone, not like a fucking panic chord, or like not something that like the whole thing is just crashing in. It's just like, this is one of these things is weirdly off of the rest of the band.
It's the short song too.
Yeah, the 5.5
minutes. It would be the only one that someone to go like, what do we need to release as a single? Well, it's the shortest song on the fucking record.
There you go. I like there's parts on here where either Matthew or Andy are doing like some like kind of alternate picking thing with the bends. Awesome. Really great. As far as lyrics go, I wrote down, I kind of mentioned earlier with Death's the Philosopher. There's like a line in that was like, he says like, the philosopher, so much about nothing at all. And I'm like, yeah, they're talking about like, all these people that claim to know nothing and they're, better than us or whatever. And it's like, burn it all down. Like literally, there's a line, I think it's the past is lost, the future is unknowable. Only the present could be truly experienced, can truly be known. And then it's like, basically like, let's burn it all down, burn all the museums down, burn everything down, and let's just get weird and start fresh.
The end lyrics of the song, like the second, what you're talking about and on, remind me of the lyrics of Another World is Inevitable, which is like the last or next to last song off Summit.
Right. Definitely.
Very similar. I don't think that song is about like philosophers being dumb or like it doesn't matter, but just like the everything that we know is going to end as we know it, and from there something better will be built. I think those are very similar themes.
Dylan, any thoughts?
Yeah, just adding to what Swindle said, it seems like this episode is real bleak, which is funny to think about with this band's catalog. But yeah, lyrically, it definitely hits a little bit closer to home because it does hit upon all of those thoughts that I think as well-informed individuals, we all have at a certain point in our life, at different points in our life. And I think you finally start to realize at a certain age that you go, oh, there probably isn't anything once the lights are off, right?
Yeah.
It's the lights are off. And what you're seeing when the lights are off is that chemical releasing from your brain for those few seconds. And the lights are off. And as bleak as this sounds, like once you're gone, you're gone. You don't know what's going to happen when you're gone because you're gone. And you could speculate. There are going to be people that forget about you. There are going to be people that will never forget about you, that sort of thing. But ultimately, you're gone. Things move on. Hopefully things go on for the better. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do. So it's a very self-reflective record. And it almost seems like Brian may have had something that happened in his life at this point, because when I've had these thoughts, something major has happened in my life. And I'm not saying that happens for everybody, but I know most of the people that I've been around in my life that are still around me have those kind of epiphanies at certain points. And they have those deep, just gut-wrenching thoughts at that point, and they learn from them and go, okay. And they move on, and their attitude is kind of changed. or they have a different outlook on life. And it definitely seems like this record and the time maybe in between Summit and this record, something could have happened. It definitely feels like that. If not, he just did a lot of studying and self-reflection. And maybe he did read some novels written by philosophers that were full of their own fucking shit. And he was like, you know what? They're stupid. Let's just talk about how stupid these guys are. And here's what actually happens.
Going into the next kind of interlude. I like this title. I think this might even be my favorite kind of segue track. Take off your skin and dance in your bones.
It's a reference to a 1930s song that was covered by Tom Waits.
Damn. Yeah, I wonder, because obviously it's an instrumental, but I noticed it too, but it's on like their Bandcamp, and then also the I don't know, like any lyrical thing that you find on, like I went on Genius and I saw it, and I'm like, I wonder what the like prompted them to add that to the thing.
I don't know. It was weird. It was kind of similar to what you were saying about one of the other songs. I was just like, it seems weird that they put a lyric to an instrumental track here. I'm going to look up what this lyric is. And I was like, wait, this is a Tom Waits song? And I was like, wait, this is a song from the fucking 30s? Like, it's weird. Also, it pissed me off on Bandcamp. You can like see people that have like spent money on the record, and they'll be like, this is what I like about the record, and this is my favorite song. And someone literally said that Take Off Your Skin and Dance in Your Bones was their favorite song on the album.
Yeah. You got
it was like one of the top 3 people that were like reviewing the album.
All these 14-minute long, like arranged, like meticulously crafted songs. Like, nah, this is I mean, more power to you if that's like if the interludes are your favorite. I guess rad.
Yeah. I like ragtime.
All this to say, this feeds into the next song pretty well with all the atmosphere. Immorality Dictates. Oof. Yeah, I think it's like a couple minutes of that. Like, if this album is like rooted in nature, it kind of feels like I'm in a big forest, and there's like, these are just like all of the surrounding sounds, or that's when I was listening to this record. That's kind of how I felt.
When I did my last listen before we got on, I was like sitting in my bedroom, had the windows open, and I was listening, and I was like, fuck, I didn't know there were birds on the record. And I paused. I was like, motherfucker, like the birds outside. And I went, that's fitting. Like I expect, now I'm like going to hear it and expect like birds to be on that kind of beginning 4 minutes of the track. Because that's what it feels like. And then somebody finds a body in a ditch, and the second half of the track starts. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. After like a few minutes of like the atmospheric kind of ambient parts, there's like the clean guitars. And then, you have the return of Emily McWilliams, Silver Godling, with also these kind of like layered vocals behind and the backwards as well. Yeah. Very interesting.
I don't know if I wouldn't know, but I don't know if they just used the same track, but reversed it. Or if she was saying like different shit for the reversed.
I was going to say, that's a throwback to our 1916 episode with those backward vocals in Nightmare of the Dreamtime. Yeah.
That's what they were thinking of on this track. There's no need to ask about it. Well, it's just it.
What would Lemmy do? All right.
I'm sure that's what Thou is thinking when they write music.
Absolutely.
The also Josh doing very well with like, I love like all the kind of cymbal washes and stuff like that. It makes it very, very, very nice. Some of the guitar parts, or some of the like the arrangements that were written, even kind of reminded me of like some new wave playing as well. I don't know what in particular. I couldn't really quite place it, but I will say that the new wave thing is kind of connected in here. There's a part in the lyrics, and when I was reading through it, I was like, this part of the song sticks out to me, and I don't know why. This just doesn't like quite feel like, it kind of stood out from like the rest of the words written for the album. And it's the line that says, and you know that I love you here and now, not forever. I give you the present. I don't know about the future. It's kind of like the end of the song. And I just like, I'll look it up, see what happens. So this is actually a line from a song, Stuff and Nonsense, by the New Zealand art rock new wave band Split Ends. This was featured on their fourth album, Frenzy, from 1979. I was like, damn, we're just pulling for wherever. That was so cool. I mean, we've talked about the Jim Croce reference in the first episode, but I was like, damn, what the fuck? Like, that's awesome. I don't know anything about this band, but it's cool that this is just like added on here.
So in some interviews, Brian is like, yeah, sometimes my favorite part of the lyrics are shit that I just take from books and songs and
I borrowed it.
Yes. Influenced. That's the word.
Right.
This is my favorite song on the record, which is weird because the first 4 to 6 minutes is kind of this buildup, right? It almost seems like a completely separate track. This has the fucking riff in it for me. Like, this is my favorite riff on the record. It samples the the riff itself is the clean guitar lick that's played before it. It's just played in that thou register. Like this is the thou riff. Like, I heard that, and we've used kind of reference points in some of the prior records of like, oh, it sounds like I Hate God, sounds like Crowbar, sounds like this, sounds like that. This is the album, I think, where you could really start going, that's a thou riff. Like, I heard that song and it's like, yep, that's a fucking thou riff with how it's paced and how it feels, and how the strings are bent and they've got the grasp of it. Like, that's the big riff for me on the whole album.
This song is like 9.5 or 10.5 minutes long. I kind of literally only think there's 4 guitar parts in this whole fucking song because like the shit builds for so long, and then when the band like when the song explodes, it's the same riff as it's building, and then I think there are only 2 riffs after that for the rest of the whole song.
That's all you need.
They just take it and run with it. But yeah, it's so melodic, and another kind of standout where it's just like, damn, that's like stuck in my head. Another thing about the lyrics too, just great. It's so funny to read through some of this with like kind of just, I think really the point maybe Brian is trying to get across here is just like, we're fucking animals fueled by like desire and pleasure, that it's just like, yeah, we're fucking rolling around in our own filth and what, like it's so great. I love all reading through the lyric sheet of this particular song.
It's good. This is the Hellraiser song.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's right.
This is it. Sins of the Flesh.
I thought you were talking about the next song when it came to Hellraiser part. Ode to Physical Pain.
Ode to Physical Pain.
I mean, I guess it's also there too.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like this track, and maybe you can. I didn't see it listed on there, but is there piano in the beginning of this? It feels like there's like I couldn't tell. It felt like maybe there was a piano like chord being struck like in the beginning along with the guitar part.
God,
I could be wrong, but I mean, you do have Silver Godling on the record, so I thought that's what it was initially, but then it kind of dissipated, and it maybe sounded like I don't know. I could be wrong, but
it's the very beginning of it.
100%.
And I think it's guitar really low with like some sort of effect on it, delay, reverb, whatever it may be, but it's really low, and it almost sounds like, again, I believe there was an album, one of the earlier albums that had like a music box kind of thing, motif playing on it. I think it's kind of that vibe, but I think if you go back and listen to it, I wish we could somehow solo that out and listen to it, but I see what you're saying. Like, it definitely sounds like a piano off in the distance or something.
I thought it was like, it's really quick and it's just in the beginning, but it kind of confused me a little bit. But again, more atmosphere and ambience. I think there's like definitely a slide guitar being played, maybe with like a volume pedal to kind of create those swells that are happening. Very, very, very cool.
This is probably a stranger reference to make, but I'm kind of king of doing that dumb shit. The beginning of Damage Incorporated has that layered like bass guitar at the beginning of it that's got all those swells, and it's got these different kind of like harmonies playing with it. And it's kind of in that vibe. Like, it definitely seems like something they dropped in the mix, maybe played with a volume pedal, like you said, with a delay or whichever. And it does feel like a separate instrument, but it almost feels like something that was recorded with a muffle in front of it too. Like, it's a very cool thing that stuck out to me immediately.
Another classic Thou thing of lulling you into a false sense of comfort. And then maybe Brian with like the biggest like belting scream to kind of like kick off this next section of the song. It's like so in your face, just letting loose. And then again, kind of, I don't know, I guess like ending on like that sparse guitar at the end.
Yep.
It's just kind of like, it's done. It's so cool.
I think the album ends violently. It's not pleasant. It's not supposed to be, right? Title, that's one of the greatest titles of all time. Ode to Physical Pain. Great.
It's a double-edged
It's
sword.
life.
I think it's it's some pretty, I think you can take it either way. It can be very bleak, but at the same time, it's like, maybe knowing that you are kind of powerless in a lot of this, and I only have control of what's around me while I'm here, and that's it. I don't know anything. That's it. I don't know a fucking thing. And so I guess depending on how maybe you interpret that, whether, you could be like, all right, I guess we'll just give up. But then again, it's like, well, you just enjoy your life now and, spend it with the people around you. And I don't know, maybe make a really fucking cool record, I guess is pretty dope. But that kind of rounds out the album discussion, I guess, is if that's, do you have any other notes on this at all?
When as soon as the vocals end at the very end of the song, before like the guitar comes back to play very quietly out, there is like a sample that sounds like the radio for like 2 seconds. And I wonder what the fuck. A, I wonder like what made them want to put it in, and B, I wonder what it even is.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting effect. Thoughts as like far as like when you reach the end of the record, final thoughts on the what you listen to on the album?
I don't listen to this album that much, and I don't listen to like all the way through. I don't listen to Magus that much all the way through because it's just so long, and I don't want to like listen to the album if I'm not going to listen to the whole album. But it's really this week, like listening to it every day all the way through, I like was like, oh shit, this album is incredible. This is a fucking great album. And I also love Magus. I think I've listened to Magus more than this album, but I might change that. I might this might be the one that I go back to and listen to more.
Summit I keep going back to Summit because that one's just so fucking wild. But it's arguable that either one of those two on any depending day, be it Heathen or Summit, could be my favorite Thou records. Magus is fine. I enjoy it a lot. I do understand where Swindle is coming from, though. When an album's that long, even if I do thoroughly enjoy it, I have to go, all right, I have to dedicate the time to listen to this, and I want to make sure I listen to it rather than just hear it. But listening to this record as much as I have over the last, week and a half, it's very clear that I could listen to Summit and go, okay, now I want to hear the next best one. And I've got two in a row that are just like neck and neck. Great record, fucking great record. I would even say a perfect Thou record.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And this record is always going to have like a special place in my heart as far as like, meeting you guys and, that moment of like sitting on the living room floor with the computer, connected to the TV and hearing it for the first time, getting introduced to a lot of like underground music for the first time. Yes, it is a long album. Yes, I think it requires that you dedicate some time. You set aside some time to really listen to it because it deserves it. It's a really amazing record. I think there are definitely songs within this band's catalog that, like Smoke Pigs is one of my favorite songs. Like, do I listen to the full Oakland singles comp? Maybe not all the time, but I think this record, deserves to be like enjoyed front to back. And I just love it. This was originally released on CD by Gilead Media in 2014. I think the maybe the first time it was released on a double vinyl was through Vendetta Records that same year. Now, I want to touch on the artwork a little bit too, because we kind of mentioned that at the beginning. So the one that I know, the one I know that Dylan has is through the artist Julia Margaret Cameron, who is like a British photographer. That's, I guess, the original cover that I would assume, but I believe this is also the photographer that would have been used for the Rhea Silvia EP. They look the same.
That makes sense
to me, so I'm assuming that is who it is. I could be wrong, but Swindle's copy of the record,
that's a weird one.
It is really cool. That was done by an English illustrator and author by the name of Aubrey Beardsley, and yeah, it looks incredible. You should definitely check out maybe more of Aubrey's work. I kind of did a quick search, and I kind of want to dive into that a little more. Then I never knew who actually did the artwork that is featured on the Bandcamp stuff. That's like more cohesive. It all kind of has the same, vibe. This is a French artist and illustrator by the name of Gustave Doré, I believe is how it's pronounced. So sorry if I fucked it up, but yeah, you can really find all of that on the Bandcamp. It kind of has all of the same similar vibe. I don't know if there was a, kind of the one on Bandcamp features like an older man with the beard, kind of looking off. I don't know. I guess it's probably just kind of take your pick of what feels the most, what feels the best for the album. What vibe is it giving off? I'm sure Brian has just like that archive of, stuff and in his pocket. So that was the one that ended up down there. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to see like each album cover for this, like the same record, depending on the format you have. I found a quote by Brian that says, "I like to have fun with the layouts, and different formats give me real estate to play with it aesthetically." And he also mentioned, I also like, maybe sometimes I like to rewrite history in a way. I think there's like a thing of like, maybe I read it in an interview where it's like OCD, where it's like, oh, if I would have gone back and done this, maybe this is what I would have used. Or so doing some of these reissues, I think you kind of get to play around with that a little bit, where like, maybe I include this bonus track on here. Maybe I use this layout. And, I like that. I think it's cool. It makes for an interesting collection. Does it make it confusing sometimes? But it is a lot of fun to own such great pieces of art, I think.
It's never done. Right?
Never done.
It's never done.
I like in all Brian's interview, and in Brian's interviews, everyone asks him about the art and why every album has so many covers. And he's like, I have some idea of how I want the stuff to work, but I don't know anything about computers. So I have to like bully my friends. I'll like tell them, give them images and shit, and they'll like put something together. And I have to keep coming back to my friends who are volunteering to do this, to be like, no, make the words smaller, make this bigger, make this look like this. He also, when he does visual stuff, he like does it all on typewriter, because he's like, yeah, I don't.
Oh my
I don't
God.
know computer.
That's
I
awesome.
hammer it out on a typewriter.
Hell yeah.
I picture him in a room like late at night with that typewriter and the keys getting jammed and like I can see it.
Well, it's that thing. Do what you know, right? Like DIY, like if you are maybe not like the most musically inclined person, or maybe you like have a vision in your head, like how do you achieve it with the tools that you have? That's pretty sick. I love it. I love this record, and I'm really glad that we got to talk about it today, and I'm stoked that we'll get to talk about Magus next week too.
Magus.
All
right. This is normally the part of the episode where we would recommend what we've been listening to lately, but kind of the independent music world lost a giant this week. Steve Albini passed away on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Tuesday or Wednesday.
Terminator timeline, but yeah.
So we thought we would give some recommendations over some of our favorite albums that he either played on or recorded. And before we get into our picks, obviously one of the biggest ones for all three of us probably is In Utero.
Mhm.
That
100%.
personally like changed. We obviously have an episode about it, but it completely changed the way I listened to and thought about music and guitar as a whole. And that album, if he had only recorded that album, like obviously that would have changed my life, but he also recorded so much Jason Molina music, and that has been so much of what I've listened to as an adult. Like the Magnolia Electric Company by Songs Ohia, and Josephine by Magnolia Electric Company. I just fucking love those albums. Those are perfect albums, and I listen to them all the time. A couple of newer albums that he recorded are Strange Peace by the band Mets, and the album Stella by Super Unison. I really like both of those records, and I didn't even really know that he recorded that Super Unison record. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I saw Megan from Super Unison, Punch, King Woman, share some pictures that were from that kind of recording process and everything. And, it's at Electrical Audio in Chicago. And, I imagine everybody who got the opportunity to record with him, I'm sure has like a bunch of great stories, and, whether it be about like his coffee and, just so many things that you could probably dive in on. But yeah, that's super cool. I also did not know that he recorded that album with them.
And also, obviously, the Slint recordings are a big deal to us.
Yep.
Having done an episode on that, he didn't record Spiderland, but he did record Tweez, and he recorded that like kind of posthumously released 3 or 4 song demo or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, like growing up in the Chicagoland area, I don't even know if I really became aware of Steve until like later in my like college years. Like I just wasn't. I probably started to I guess I probably started to get into like this form of like underground music maybe like towards the end of high school, and then meeting you guys and getting into new forms of music, becoming aware of Steve, and like Steve's sense of humor and like the way he carries himself and the way that he chose to run his studio and record bands. And we've mentioned a million times, like I just kind of am an engineer. I let the band do what they do best, and I capture it. And I feel like he really was able to do that and help make a lot of really important records to us, like you mentioned. I wanted to do a band that he was a part of, Shellac, which I got into because of Thou. I know Thou definitely was influenced by Steve's work and the bands that Steve worked with. 1000 Hertz from 2000, the band's third album, released on Touch and Go Records. Love listening to this record. Kind of like the Slint records, it feels like very kind of freeform. Like it just feels like a bunch of guys got in a room and just kind of felt it out, and structured songs around it. There's a lot of like funny shit on the record. There's a lot of like references to like analog tape recordings and stuff. Really, really great record. I should also mention that Shellac has an album coming out. The date this airs, this episode, this Friday, the album 2 L Trains, their sixth, and I'm assuming final record, will be dropping Friday, May 17th. It's like their first record in like 10 years, recorded at Electrical Audio in Chicago. And I think it was recorded over like several years. Like they had like 4 different like kind of spurts where they did it in like 2017, 2019, 2021, 2022, 10 new songs. I looked it up at the time of recording. Vinyl is currently out of stock. So maybe on the Touch and Go website, it'll be restocked at some point. I think maybe if you go to your local record store, it may be available there. But definitely one that I will be checking out on Friday when it comes out. Now, a band that Steve worked with that was a very important record to me growing up, and this is like totally by accident. I didn't even know Steve recorded it, but when I picked it up. But there is a record store in the suburbs of Illinois, the Chicagoland area, called Kiss the Sky. And at the time, it was located in Geneva. It's located in Batavia, Illinois now. I went into my local record store and I like maybe started getting into like early punk rock and early proto punk, and I picked up this record by the Stooges, and it probably came out around this time, but one of the first CDs I ever owned was the Stooges Weirdness record from 2007. This was like their fourth record. They recorded with Steve at Electrical Audio. It was like their first bunch of new material since like Raw Power. The last to feature Ron Ashton before he passed away like maybe a couple years after, but featured like pretty much all the core members with a new bass player, Mike Watt from the Minutemen.
We jammy kind
so great. And so there's a lot. I love this record. I think there are a lot of fun songs, kind of maybe some new life into this band. And, they probably didn't need to record this record, but they did it. And I had a lot of fun listening to this record. I think a lot of people definitely don't like it. I think it didn't get the best reviews, but I think maybe because I didn't have a huge relationship with the band at the time, I was maybe able to go in it with like kind of an open mind. And I listened to this on my Walkman on the bus like all the fucking time. Love this record. And some of the interviews from this time are really great. I think the Stooges appeared on the Henry Rollins like show.
They did.
And Mike Watt was like fucking he was like high on something. It was buck wild, and everybody's just cracking up because they know and they're just trying to get through it. I love these records, so check them out if you haven't. But some great Steve Albini output.
So my first pick is it's kind of a weird tie-in that I just got to thinking about as we were sitting here talking about all these. I chose High on Fire's 2005 album, Blessed Black Wings. It's not only the first High on Fire record I ever bought, but it's the final record. It's the record that was recorded with Joe Preston of the Melvins and Thrones. But it was also recorded by Steve Albini. And as we've got an episode on Death is His Communion, Death is His Communion was recorded by Jack and Dino.
Which one?
Jack and Dino. Which one? Yeah. Jack and Dino recorded Bleach. Steve Albini recorded In Utero, so there's a bit of a Nirvana connection with both bands. And I love this record so much. I mean, the track Blessed Black Wings, Devolution, just great. Like, this is the album when I heard the band and I went, this sounds like Motorhead, like on meth, like that much more so. And Steve Albini's production is crushing on this. It makes the heavy shit sound heavier, but it adds to that whole engineer thing of like, this is what High on Fire sounded like at this point in time. Steve just moved a couple knobs and placed a mic. And it really adds to that. So Relapse Records release, I used to see all the kind of ads in the back of the Decibel magazines, and when Revolver was good, like all of the backs of those, like for this album, and it had the great, I believe it's Eric Roper artwork on it. And I just had to fucking buy it. And years later, I found out like, oh, Albini did this. The same guy that did In Utero did this. One of my favorite grunge bands of all time, whatever you want to call it, is Tad.
Yeah.
And they recorded an EP with Steve called Salt Lick. And Salt Lick was paired with their debut album called God's Balls. God's Balls came out in 89. Salt Lick came out in 1990. And what they did is when they released Salt Lick, they kind of compiled it with some songs from God's Balls, and they just did a split. I think it's the A side of God's Balls with the album, but Salt Lick has a track on there called Wood Goblins that they have a music video for. That's just Tad running around with a fucking chainsaw, and they're just drunk out in the woods dressed like lumberjacks. Perfect video. Tad's an underrated 90s band. There's a great documentary on Tad that Steve spends a lot of time in. Great record, great EP. If you've never listened to Tad, you could really listen to any record in their catalog and you kind of get the gist of the band. But again, another great Steve Albini production. And my last pick is if not one of my favorite bands, definitely my favorite kind of post-metal band. I still think they're one of the heaviest bands of all time. But Steve got to work with this band for the rest of their career, for every album after this. It's Neurosis, A Sun That Never Sets. And this was still during the era that Neurosis would have the visuals playing behind them in the screens. Austin and I got a chance to see the band in, I believe, 2015.
Yep.
And that was when they stopped doing the visuals with it. It was a very straightforward show. But I remember seeing the video for Stones from the Sky, which is on this album, and just being completely changed with the repetition, the vibe, the placement of the lyrics, as well as the production of that album alone really stuck out to me. It's almost like you could hear the creak of the kick drum pedal. Like you could hear it like just bending and moving, and just this wash of sound. Something about Steve's productions are really pure, because he says it himself. He's not a producer, he's an engineer. You know, if a band sounds good and they have good songs, he can make those songs sound the way they need to sound without doing much of anything. You know, he goes in, he had a very, very non-ego driven way of producing, right? You know, very self-deprecating sense of humor in a lot of things, and maybe a little edgy at times, but it was definitely he has changed the scope of what heavy music is, or at least had a hand in ushering it in, right? With making heavy bands sound good and making good bands sound good. You know, there are certain records you look into and you don't realize he's worked on, and then you dig deep into it. You're like, oh shit, he did work on this record. I believe Nate Garrett shared that he didn't work on a Spirited Drift record, but it was recorded electrical audio.
Yeah.
So like there's a connection there. Like he had his hands on a lot of records, had his hands on a lot of music throughout the years. I mean, Big Black, I remember seeing the cover for, is it Songs About Fucking? Is that the title?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty intense album. For what it was. Big Black is vastly different than Shellac.
Yeah.
But man, I remember seeing that artwork and just going, what am I looking at? You know, what is this? And then learning that like he produced probably one of the handful of records that all three of us can agree on as being one of our favorite records, which is In Utero.
Yep.
And you read that and you read about the prank phone calls that all those guys did to like
Gene
Simmons was one of them.
Yeah.
Prank calling like different people and like running phone bills up, and like, okay, this guy kind of knew what he was doing. So it's a bummer, you know. We learn in life that not everything lasts. Enjoy the shit while it's here. Enjoy the time you got. Do what you want to do what you love, and keep on rocking in the free world.
Dylan for president.
No. Thank you.
I'd love to hear anybody listening if they want to share maybe their favorite Steve Albini release, maybe your favorite band, favorite album he worked on. You can comment below in this episode, whether you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, what have you. If you want to leave us a review, you can always reach out to us as well. riffworshippod@gmail.com. You can always reach out to us that way. We have playlists available on Spotify, Riffs on Repeat. You also have Hits from the Crypt on Apple Music. Dylan every week does reviews of more modern contemporary records every Friday. Reviews from the Dilbozer's Den. You just did one of Atre Billis. That was great.
Yes.
And I don't know which one's coming up now, but there will be one on Friday.
There will be one on Friday.
You can definitely listen to that. Our live show airs every Monday still. Vocal Distortion, 6 p.m. Central, FM 89, WONC.org, and the iHeartRadio music app. We're going to be back next week with Thou Part 4. So stay tuned for that. I'm very stoked to talk about this next record, Magus. It's Magus.
Magus.
But for
Magus.
For myself, for Dylan, for Swindle, thanks so much for joining us. This has been Riff Worship. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.